most people don't have enough potassium. They have too much sodium and not enough potassium. And most of the time, people are told to cut back on their sodium, but they're never told to increase their potassium.
I love the conversation of health. I love the conversation of health from the neuroscience side. So I feel like it's not a conversation a lot of people have to go into the real nitty gritty of it and kind of how it all works at the real root of it. So before we really dive into that, if you would kind of just give us a brief background on who you are, your background, and kind of why we should even bother listening to you in the first place.
Yeah, well, my name is Stephanie Pazniokas. That's how you say that crazy last name. I always say it rhymes with hocus pocus. And I I started out as a scientist, really, and then was in the lab for a while studying neuroplasticity, which is how our neurons change and basically create connections and learn and adapt. Um, I went into the industry on the life science side after a period of time with my children. And this is after I've gotten my master's degree in neuroscience, spent many years in the health and wellness space working with research in government, pharmaceutical companies, universities, and traveling for that. Um, and was just in the industry for a while. So that is sort of my background. My background has always been about psychology, biology, biochemistry. Even in high school, I thought to myself, I was taking a psychology class, I was taking my biology class, and I said, why are these classes talking about their topic as if the other thing doesn't even exist? I said, certainly there's got to be something out there called psychobiology or biopsychology or something. And at that time, I had no idea. There were 3 schools in the country who had something like that. And so I was able to go to one of them. And sort of early on in this idea of how our brain and our biology work together for health and in so many ways.
Yeah, I love that. And I don't want to gloss over the fact that, and I mean, you shared this with me in your bio. There were some struggles for you early on. I'd love if you can just kind of touch a little bit on that, because I think, much like how we talked about me not having much of a voice, right? It makes each of us relatable. Not that, hey, you are, a scientist who has all the answers because you never struggled through it personally. Right? I think sharing the personal part of our backgrounds is what makes these stories and conversations that much more authentic and that much more relatable, right? So take me
Yeah.
back to that time period and like, what were the struggles that you went through and kind of how did that take you down the road that you're on today?
I love that question. So when and then this really, it does go back to my childhood. So my parents were divorced when I was 4 and they fought a lot. I remember that. I remember going through some women's shelters. I remember my mom taking me and my brother and my sister down to Florida, and my father stayed up here. So I was really separated, and I was really angry about that. But in Florida, we struggled a lot. We had no money. We didn't have a lot of food, so I was hungry and outside a lot. There was a lot of going on. The only positive reinforcement over the years that I got from my mom was how well was I doing in school. So I sort of uh, you know, it was tough. I mean, even going out to a restaurant, I had such anxiety because I didn't know if I'd ever get to go out to eat again. This took me until I was in my 20s to get over, by the way. I'd have such anxiety that I was going to choose the wrong thing and regret it and never have a chance to get it again. Um, so I have a lot of this sort of food story that starts out with, but also this perfectionist story that the only kind of love that I was going to get was if I performed well in whatever it was, that I did things well. So there was a lot of that people pleasing and perfectionism and workaholism that went into it. And these two things sound different. They're not, because when I was in college, when I was starting work, and when my first marriage fell apart and I had to go back into the workforce after being at home with my children, I I said yes to everything. And I started out without a lot of money and without a lot of food. So once I started traveling all the time for work and I could expense my food, I was eating. But I was also not sleeping well because I was in and out of hotels. I was high stress. I was missing my kids' childhood because I said, I have to make money. I have to make money. I can't be poor like I grew up. I need to make sure my kids have food. What I didn't realize was they needed me more. My health was suffering. So I actually gained a lot of weight. By the time I was at my lowest in my health, personal health, I was around 190 pounds. I was pre-diabetic. Diabetes ran in my family. And I had a lot of pain. I was depressed. I was very depressed. And I was barely there for my kids. And this isn't something that I share a lot, but there were times where I would have a whole bottle of wine at night, just myself, just to relax, just to de-stress. And I would take a book and I would go off away and after the kids went to bed, and I just was not available. There was no more left over. There was no more margin for my family. I spent it all during the day. So I completely ruined my health in all of the ways that I can think of. Um, with the high stress and the lack of sleep and poor food choices and um, lack of social. So even during that time, all of my friends got put to the side. We used to get together regularly. I hadn't seen them in 2 years. I stopped going to church because Sundays were some of the only days that I might have at home. And so I lost all of my community. All of these things that are so important to our health, I didn't have anymore, despite the fact that I had all of this knowledge, right, about health. I was not applying it to myself. I was still learning, listening to all of sort of the conventional wisdom, not connecting everything because my knowledge was separate from my life, which is silly, but I wasn't applying it.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, because I feel like that is a very relatable story to a lot of people. And even to me, I feel like there's a lot of times where you think you are doing the right thing for yourself or your family. And in fact, you're essentially creating more harm than good because you're not taking care of yourself. And it's very easy for us to overlook the simple things and say, hey, it's important for me to take care of my body and my own health so that A, I'm fine, but B, I am able to be there for the other people in my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people look at, hey, your kid or your relationship or whatever it is, would you die for that person? And a lot of people, their instinct would be, yeah, I would die for my kid. But when you flip it and say, hey, would you live for them? Most people never even consider that. And it's such a small switch, but living on purpose for yourself and the people around you, I think is so incredibly important. And I love how you shared that story of kind of where you were. Now take me a little bit through like the switch for you about living on purpose and really the things that you helped kind of uncover in yourself and that now you're helping other people figure out for themselves as well.
Absolutely. So I did get remarried early on at that when I went back into work. High school sweetheart kind of a thing. It's a great story. That's a whole other thing. However, after a number of years of him just watching me, just 7 years now, 7 years in this job, where by the end he said, "Is there anything else you can do? Can you find another job? This like we just can't go on like this." And I said, it's just going to be the frying pan into the fire. I just had everything I looked for was just more of the same, right? Because that's how I felt about what I did. And truly the change came, it really was a miracle. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just when something so fortuitous happens that you would have never imagined. So I was getting ready to go to Brazil on a 2 week business trip, 2 weeks. Now, at this point, my youngest was 7 and my older two, I mean, I just missed so much of the most formative years. My husband potty trained her and now she's around 7 years old, 6 years old. And I'm getting ready to go to this trip to Brazil for a week and then having to go from there to California. for another week for a trade show. So, and I was giving a talk at on regenerative medicine at the university in Brazil. I was helping somebody install a bioreactor to regenerate livers. This is all really, really fantastic and exciting stuff. But it was a long trip, and right before that trip, just 2 days before, somebody called me and said, a friend of mine, "Hey, I just got this promotion. Do you know anybody who? I need to build my team." And she had texted me that. And then she called and she says, I was thinking, Stephanie, you could do this. I don't, you could do this. And we just started talking. I was standing outside on the lawn for an hour and a half as we're talking about this career change opportunity. And I said, okay. So on the plane, I had plane time. So I did a whole bunch of research, got to know it a bit. And, in the hotel at midnight, I'm like putting through this application. I kept losing the internet connection, had to keep starting over that application. I think I did it 5 times before it went through. And I just put it in there. And it turns out they called me back. I did a phone interview at a layover between 2 flights in California. And by the time I got back from the trip, that Thursday I had an interview, that Friday I had a job, and everything changed. That switch, and not everybody has that opportunity to really but it was almost like was a door shutting and a window opening. It was like a whole entire chapter just slammed shut. You're starting over. This was an entirely new industry in payment integrity for healthcare. And they were doing a Biggest Loser contest. So this was this opportunity to just start over, let go of all of that old stuff, no more traveling. I was able to be at home more. And I couldn't even talk about the whole situation without bursting out in tears of great gratitude that I got this new chance. And so this Biggest Loser contest comes along, and I'm still thinking about the conventional wisdom. Oh, eat less, move more. I was the hangriest, nastiest, I lost weight, but I was not I was not happy. I was exercising 7 days a week. It was really tough. And I ended up, I was the second, I came in second place, but because, I'm competitive. So that I was like, I didn't get first place, but I came in second place and I thought, this is great. I lost 50 pounds or 45 or something like that. But then stuff happens and I didn't change my patterns, my workaholic perfection. I wasn't dealing with that stuff yet. And the stress started to creep up, and I was working, I was overworking, and the weight came back. Right. And I said, I do not want this. I do not want to waste this opportunity. And I said, you know what? I'm someone like me. I know things. What if I just didn't listen to all of the other stuff and went back and to all of the things that I actually learned in college, all the things that I've known over the years, working with all of these labs and universities, doing all of this life science research about health and all of that, and said, I know how to learn. I know how to do these things. And I sort of just went right back to the papers, went right back to the research. And so for me, I said, me personally, I'm a data person. Like, okay, why don't I just start making small changes? I know neuroscience. I know how the brain changes. I know that it gets freaked out, that it has this primal fear of major change. And if I try to set myself up with this big goal of reaching the peak of a mountain of perfect health, and I don't know how to get there, I'm not going to be able to sustain that. It is only going to go for so long as I have energy. And the second my kids start needing me for this or that, or some other roadblock happens in the world, I'm going to stop and I'm just going to go back to some old default. Right. One of my favorite books is Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but
Yes.
I highly recommend it to absolutely everyone, because it really dives into how change happens as well. But part of it is shaping your path, making it doable, making it interesting. But from a neuroscience perspective, we really want to make small changes and stick with that one thing for just a couple of weeks, just to get those neuronal connections, those new neuronal connections formed. And in the lab, that's about how long it would take for neuroplasticity and changes in synaptic connections to have. I used to see that happening in petri dishes, right? And with live cultures and in other scenarios. So I knew that. And I said, I got to apply this to myself. And I did. And so since what, 2018 is I actually started over, and I have, you know, my health has never been better. I am not on medications. I don't take anything. I have no pain anymore. I had so much pain in my body that is gone. My inflammation levels are not detectable. Um, and it's not because I suddenly applied everything I knew all at once. It took 7 years of just small changes, and it doesn't have to take that long. It's just that I was reinventing the wheel, right? So I hope I do that much faster for my clients, but it's the same principle. There's only so fast you can go when you know, and it's about knowing what are the best things to do right now to make that incremental step forward, so that you're just getting constant value, and you're learning it so well that you're not going to, the poop doesn't hit the fan and then you go back to the old ways all the time. You understand why and how and what to do, and it just becomes part of your life. It's no longer, it's actually harder to do the old thing. And that's where I want it to be at the end.
Yeah, I love that. And I think so. What I'm hearing you say there is it's really more about developing consistency rather than intensity. Because I think a lot of people can jump on a fad diet or do a water fast for 3 days and try and lose some weight. But what happens when, day 4 rolls around? They don't actually change anything, right? So it's more about kind of developing these longer term habits. Or would you use the word habit for this? Or is it more of a standard or a lifestyle change? What is this actual thing called?
I mean, really, it's rewiring your brain. And yes, that's a habit. In our just day-to-day talk, and how people would understand it, is a habit. It's an automatic thing. Our brain conserves energy by putting things on automation. What we want to do is help it create better automations, because its first set of automations comes from all of the things that we went through as children, what we learned as children, the patterns we saw as children, the foods we ate as children, the way we saw our parents eat as children, the way we saw them interact as children, the way we saw them be social as children. And we have this absolutely incredible superpower in our prefrontal cortex. People might call it the executive function of the brain. But we have this ability to actually take those automated processes and bring them to our consciousness, and then question them and say, does this make sense? Right? When I did that, for example, going out to eat, I had no idea consciously why I had such a difficult time making a choice and so much anxiety about making a choice. And when I started to just think about it, and I understood, because I thought it would never happen again. And then once I realized that my situation was different, and if I really wanted to go out to eat on my own, I could, and I can still choose better things there, and it can still taste good, and I can try something else next time. And that, by thinking about how I thought about it, that metacognition is the fun way of saying that, I was able to start changing how I approached that. And my favorite analogy is really hiking in the woods, right? If you go out and you're just going through the woods, say a 3-day water fast, that's like running through the woods from where you start and then stumbling on a pond. And then you manage to get your way back, but you have no idea how you got there. You don't have a path. You don't have a trail. You didn't establish anything, right? But when we're working on, making small changes and creating those, rewiring our brain, it's really a matter of creating a new pathway and using it more and more and more, so that it's no longer a footpath in the woods, but it's a nice, well-trodden trail, maybe with some pea stone and no weeds are going to grow. And just the more time we spend on it, the better that gets. But when we're doing that, we're spending less time on that old trail. It's growing in. The weeds are coming up. It's getting smaller. It's getting harder to travel. So that path becomes more difficult. The new path becomes easier. And that's essentially what we're doing in our brains. And why I say 2 weeks. First of all, as a good scientist, you want to change one thing at a time. You want to know what you're changing is the thing that's causing a difference, right? And you want to know that it's working for you. And 2 weeks is great, because that is not only the time it takes for your brain to start establishing something, but it's also how long it takes your physical body to adapt and to a new change. physically in our cells. And so, for example, somebody might, um, want to be changing the dog food their dog eats, right? And they always tell you just do a little bit at a time. First, start out with 1/8 of their food dish with the new food, then go to 1/4 cup, and then a half, however big your dog is. But you don't do it all at once because their body has to change and adapt. But after a couple of weeks, you can be on a whole entirely new dog food, and they're okay. So our bodies take that long time, to adapt. Our brains take that time to adapt. Doing a small thing for that period of time helps us understand the impact of that change. And we know we can now use data to have an outcome, driven procession forward. And I think that that's really important to success. And and then you add another thing. So now you start working on the next section of that path while continuing to do the first part. So that first part is just getting more and more solid and well built. And then you start making your path forward. So instead of trying to run all the way to the end, if somebody came to me and said, I want to do Whole30, I want to change all 8 of these things right now and do that for 30 days, I'd say, well, let's slow the roll a little bit, because changing all of that program wants you to change all at once for 30 days, it's not sustainable. But you haven't even had time to learn all those things. You don't know what is working and what isn't working. You've changed all the things. So for so many reasons, that's a hard thing. Now, is it a wonderful goal? Absolutely. I would do it over 14 weeks.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people who could do it or who could do their 3-day water fast, but they're relying on willpower rather than building a sustainable habit or like that path. Right. So I would imagine that there's a statistical difference between relying on willpower alone to carry you through versus like actually doing this a little slower, more sustainable, and strategically pegging down, hey, for the next year, I'm going to pick 26 things that can get me to my goal. And each one, 2 weeks at a time, I'm going to place the next one, right? Work on that one for 2 straight weeks. And then after 2 weeks, I'm going to add the next one. And then very strategically pick this apart. I think people really, they underestimate how much can be accomplished in the course of a year, right? Because they think a year is a long time. I don't want to wait a year to feel healthy. I don't want to wait a year. I want to feel healthy tomorrow. So let me just go buy a pill, take an injection, do whatever it is that I can get this result tomorrow. And then what winds up happening, they wind up gaining it all back, or they wind up losing whatever progress they made. And oftentimes worse, right? It's not only just you got back what you lost, but then you put yourself even further behind. Then you have the mental loss of it, like, hey, I screwed up. I'm not good at this. I can't do this, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
Right, but I love the way
yeah.
you're approaching it here because it also allows you to build momentum, right? I think it's a lot less pressure on you to make one small change where you see now, hey, I was able to stick to this one thing. Maybe I wasn't 100% perfect in my overall health for these 2 weeks, but this one thing I committed to, I nailed. Now you have a little bit of positive momentum so that the next one you pick up, you're already under the belief system that you can do this. It makes it that much better, right? Do you see the same thing?
Absolutely. Remember, I mentioned that big, huge change creates fear in our lizard brain, right? That's our limbic system in our brain, and so that's the other aspect of trying to change too much at once. Um, there's so much to it. A, we haven't developed the pathway. B, it's scary. Um, you know, if we think about, what they call evolutionary psychology, that big of a change, it's tough. We don't necessarily know everything about it. It's safer to just do a small thing. It's easy to just say, and it's not about just saying, well, I'm going to eat more protein for 2 weeks. It's, I'm going to eat, I like to use hand size portions. That's part of, because you can take that with you anywhere. Nobody's walking everywhere with a scale and a measuring cup to go to a restaurant, right? Just an idea of how much you're going to eat. But I'm going to eat, 3 palm size portions of protein, just 3 days a week. I'm just going to get to learn, what does it even look like to eat more protein? I'm going to have something very, very, very specific, and I'm going to know if I did it or not. And when it comes to willpower, it's not a myth, it's not an illusion, but we put way more stock in this idea of willpower than is actually uh, warranted. Motivation is really more important. Understanding why we're doing something and it being something that's important to us. This is what Chip and Dan Heath in the book Switch would call appealing to the elephant. Our logical brain is the rider of that elephant. The elephant is our emotional brain. The rider, if the rider is just trying to direct the elephant where it doesn't want to go, that's where we have our traditional idea of what willpower can get us, and then it fails because you're going to lose that. The elephant's a lot bigger. But if you can shape the path and make it easier for the elephant to go to a certain place, if you can, if the elephant has the same deep desire, that's that emotion that you have in wanting to do it, if you can meet together on that, it's so much easier to get to where you want to go. But so willpower is partly built from that understanding of why do you even want to do it? And when you don't do something, if you put something in front of yourself and for those 2 weeks you don't nail it, you get to ask yourself, and this is exciting, this is not a failure. You get to ask yourself, wow, why didn't that work? Well, I did this instead. Oh, why was that more important to my elephant? Why was that more important? Or did I not shape the path well enough and it was just too hard to do it the way I thought I was going to do it, right? So that's what's so exciting about it is it's not a failure. You have more data, so now you have more information on how to get yourself to where you want to go, and you get to just, make it a little easier, double it down, maybe prepare a little bit more. So the other part of willpower isn't so much the willpower, it's shaping that environment to make it easy to do the thing that you want to do. So for me, I have gotten into the habit of I plan my meals every week. And I have learned I have to find out when my daughter isn't going to be home if she's working one night so that I can have certain foods that she can't eat on those nights so that she doesn't have to, have to make two different things. Do I have a really long day? Do I have a late night session with a group? Do I have to have something pre-prepared or something that's a fast meal versus on the weekend where I might do some experimenting in my home lab, which I call my kitchen, um, and do something fun. So I look at what my schedule is going to be. If it's the summer and I'm thinking I want to grill, I'm going to look at the weather, and it doesn't take very long. You get into the habit of doing it, but you learn over time, wow, I had this thing planned and it relied on the grill and I couldn't use it. What's my backup plan? And you just start learning how to swerve around these obstacles and anticipate them. And it makes life so much easier and less stressful. I had a client once who was super overwhelmed, and she had a 4-year-old. She was a single mom. She's still a single mom. He's older and she's doing well. But the idea of meal planning was absolutely far and above what she ever thought was possible. And she had so much stress going on. And she was coming out of a very difficult time in her life where she was hyper responsive to stress. Even a door slamming could send her, blood sugar skyrocketing. We were doing an experiment. So, but when we just started planning just a couple of breakfasts a week and we really eased into it, she found that her stress levels went way down. And when it became just a part of something she did every day, and she worked around things and recognized that for her, having a meal service for her lunches that she could take to work was actually really important for her, right? So that she could focus on doing breakfast with her son in the morning and having him involved. So all of these things changed. But her initial thought was, I can't do that. That's way too stressful too. Oh my gosh, if I didn't do that, I'd be so stressed.
Yeah, I love that. I'm interested too. The thought just kind of came to me here when you said that she found a meal service for lunch worked well for her. The thought that I have here is, should people say, maybe I should do a meal service for me too? Maybe that's the answer. And it's obviously kind of a tongue-in-cheek question here. To me, the answer is no, do whatever's right for you, right? And, I feel like the thing that I'm hearing you say over and over again is there is no one right answer. It's about figuring out what is the right answer for you, and that could evolve over time. So it's not about, hey, here's the precise thing that you need to follow in order to reach your health. It's no, you need to take a step back and understand, hey, where are you at? What are the next steps you could take that would be beneficial to you? Because it might just be the case that in a year from now, she determines, hey, meal prep might not be the best thing, or the third party service rather might not be the best thing for me. I'm going to shift into X, Y, and Z for whatever reason, but for the time, it served a purpose, right? So what I think
Mm-hmm.
most people need to understand about this is there is no one true right answer other than focusing on, hey, what are the things that I can do right now to help move me one step further forward, and let that be the thing that you do.
Yeah, always be curious. Every single one of us is a scientist of an n equals one. That means one subject, ourselves. And we always get to be curious. We always get to say, how can I do this a little better? This isn't working for me right now. I got a job change, or now I've got a grandson living in my house that wasn't here a year ago. Things have had to change, right? So um it's okay to be open to that. But have you ever used the app Waze for getting from one place to another?
Yeah.
Or if you guys use Google Maps, no matter, whatever kind of navigation you use, you could have five people that want to go from New York to California. Some people will fly. Some might want to, they're just absolutely enamored with the idea of taking a train across the country and then making little stops along the way. Other people want to do a road trip. Some people want to bicycle. Some people want to do the scenic route. Some people want to take I-90 all the way across, right? There are so many different ways to get there. And that's our bio individuality. That is our entire life circumstance. Who we have in our houses socially. What does our day look like? Are we in charge of grocery shopping? Are we not in charge of grocery shopping? What is within our sphere of control? What are the things that we can do? And it's different for everybody. It absolutely is. So you're 100% right. Our path to our ideal health is absolutely different. I've never had two clients take the same path, and it's okay. There are skills that we'll learn that everybody will learn in a different way that makes most sense for them, and they'll apply them in a way. So some people might choose a meal service. Some people might say, I had a client that we just called it Build a Meal, because there were different types of eaters in her house, and she had an autistic adult child who was living with her, who was very particular, and everybody wanted something slightly different. So she would create some different proteins and different veggies and different things where you just take out the ingredients almost like a buffet and build your version of the meal. And some people would have a sauce and some people wouldn't have a sauce, and that's what she did. Some people really just like the one pot meal. Some people like the crock pot. It doesn't matter, right? You get to do it in the way that works best for you. Um, and then when I brought up Waze, because, hey, and then Google does this too, you're driving, hey, we saw an accident. Do you want to go around it? That's swerving around those obstacles. I was going to grill tonight and now it's pouring. What's my backup? I will look at my app that I do all my meal planning in, and I'll say, you know what? I'm going to just swap these 2 days of meals, and I'm okay with that. I bought the ingredients. I just switched things around a little bit. Had to do that this week, and it's okay. It's not like just because you created a meal plan that it's some sort of drill sergeant standing over you saying, well, now you have to do the meal plan or you're getting shot, or you're gonna have to go run laps or do push-ups. No, it's okay. We have to self-compassion, grace, learn, just be curious and be willing to learn, and being flexible and figuring out what's best for you. And I think that that's where I get so, I don't want anybody to ever have to diet ever, ever, ever again. I want people to be in a place where they're so curious to figure out, hey, what's the ideal lifestyle for me? And it doesn't just come back. A lot of times it's not about food. A lot of times I can't even start there with my clients, is it's not appropriate for them. Maybe the stress is so incredibly high, or maybe their sleep is so bad that those things are causing physiological changes in their body that make it impossible to really change what they're eating until some of these other things are addressed. And guess what? You were talking about, hey, 26 things that we're going to do over the next year. Those might change. We get to be flexible. We get to pivot. But on top of that, um, we get to, how do I want to say this? We might, I don't know, I kind of lost my thought, but we might move forward with, a couple of those and say, hey, that's not really working the way I thought it was going to work. Right. And it's okay. But most of my clients, within the first 2 to 4 weeks, when we've identified that, what we call low hanging fruit, right? they start doing that. It's not that they have to wait 26 weeks to feel better and start reaching goals. They start feeling that right away. You get immediate results, not just in the motivation and the momentum you mentioned, but actually, I feel different. I feel this. And I have had a number of people come to me say, you know, I am so much happier. I came to you because I thought this was my problem. And not that there's a problem. I had this goal, I had this problem. That's the talk that's coming in. And that's not where we stay. We don't sit there and keep looking at it as there are these things you're broken and you need to be fixed. No, not at all. We just get to say, well, what do we know? What can we do to move forward? What can we see are some gaps here, and how can that apply to your life? And let's get curious, let's move forward, and let's start getting some results now. And it just starts to snowball in a good way, not the bad kind of spiral, but a good kind of growth snowball, I like to call it.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things I was thinking too when you were talking about navigating through traffic is there are sometimes too when you'll be sitting in the car and you have your navigation up and it says, hey, there is a delay on the road ahead, but you're still on the fastest route. And I feel like people need to hear that.
Yes.
Let that sink in for a second, because there are some times when you are sitting on the highway, the metaphorical highway, and you're doing the thing, but there's a delay. And you're not going to get there as fast as you wanted to, but changing routes isn't going to get you there any faster either.
You're
Right? All it's
exactly where
going to
you
do
need
is
to
just
be.
add a little extra stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, like you just talked about, removing stress from your situation is so beneficial to just your overall health. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much they self-sabotage by creating this extra pressure and this extra stress from trying to overly control all this other stuff when they could just keep it really simple, right? Do that one little experiment and just, hey, it doesn't matter if you quote unquote win or fail. The failure is still a win if you get some education out of it and use it to further your movement forward.
Mm-hmm.
So for people to be able to just stop putting all of this undue pressure on themselves and actually just really show up and be present in this environment and just take it for what it is, learn from it and use it to move forward. And I'm curious from your perspective, when you talk about stress, I think that there's a lot of it people don't necessarily understand. We hear about cortisol, we hear about what stress does to your body, and I don't think people necessarily take it as seriously as they should. Mostly because I don't think that they understand the actual side effects or effects of stress on your body. So I'm curious if you could speak a little on what stress does to you and maybe how we can start to remove some of that from our situation.
Oh gosh, yes. And this is a big deal, and I'm so happy you asked about it, because we often think that our issues, we know that 93% of people in America do not have optimal metabolic health, and we think that all comes down to, oh, we're sedentary and we're eating junk food. That's what we think it is. We have never in the history of humanity had the level of chronic stress that we have today. We have global knowledge that was never available. We have so much coming at us that was never something we could ever have anticipated. We are constantly stimulated. It is incredible the amount of chronic stress, and we think, oh, it's just in my head. It's just a feeling. Well, it's not. Stress is so much more than a feeling, because what's actually happening in your body is that when our stress response first developed, it was intended to be acute. It was intended to get us to be able to exit a very lethal situation. For example, maybe we're running from a tiger. Who knows? Where our life is in danger in some way. And our body actually puts together this whole entire physiological process to increase blood clotting, to activate the immune system to be ready for an injury, to be able to handle it, to increase that cortisol, to get a whole bunch of blood sugar immediately into our body, into our muscles. But what happens when we're stressed and there's no bear to run from, and we're sitting there with all this high blood sugar and we're not using it? Right? What's happening in our body from a metabolic perspective? That's one aspect. The other is that we end up creating a huge amount of oxidative stress. So it's not just a matter of psychosocial stress, that the stress that we have emotions about. Getting sick and having an illness is a stressor on our body, and our body doesn't really distinguish between them. It's going to have an oxidative stress response to it. And that just means that deep down in our cells, in the areas of our cells that produce energy, that's our mitochondria, we burn oxygen to create energy. And that and we break down our sugar or our fat and mix it with that oxygen, and it goes all through and it creates energy. So we're not burning oxygen, we're using oxygen, we're using fuel. And these are our little mini internal combustion engines in our body, creating us the ability to move forward and to have energy. So I really talk about this a lot, because that's the real indicator of health is, hey, where's your energy? Not what do you weigh? That's crap. I don't care about that. Where's your energy? And then when we are under a lot of stress, whether it's a physical stress and environmental stress, we're breathing, maybe there's a whole bunch of fires happening in California and you're breathing a lot of polluted air. You may be bringing in environmental stress through pesticides on your, there's lots of ways that these things happen. There might be social stressors, interpersonal stressors. You could be financially stressed. You could be, your environment might not be safe. There might be threats of harm there. So there's a lot of things that cause stress in our lives. Every single one of them is going to put your mitochondria in an offline mode. They're not going to be producing energy. They're going to be producing what we call reactive oxygen species, which is what causes oxidative stress. That's pro-oxidative. Everybody's heard of antioxidants, right? Vitamin C, eat your blueberries, have your strawberries and your raspberries. Those antioxidants actually neutralize what we call those reactive oxygen species. When your mitochondria are in a stressed state to protect your body, right? They're putting out it's like a bonfire putting out massive amounts of smoke. Think of all that smoke as being your oxidative stress. That is impacting your body's metabolism. If that goes on for too long and you're stuck in that state, you end up with autoimmune issues. You end up with diseases of chronic inflammation because you're chronically inflamed. Your gut goes off. Every system in your body, your sleep is horrible. All because of stress? Yes. It can be all because of stress. It could be lots of things together, but all of those things together, whether it's that you're sedentary and that's creating a level of stress, or a lack of stress, because too little stress can also result in these situations. We need just right stress. We need that Goldilocks zone of stress, right? But we do not need to be living in this chronic stress. And there's a number of different types of stressors that have that physiological impact on our body. And so that can really block a lot of your progress.
There's a lot of info to take in there. So thank you for all that. I'm going to have to probably listen back to that 3 times to really consume all of that. But I'm also curious too, how much do you get into, I don't even know what to call them, supplements, for lack of a better term, when it comes to trying to biohack your way to health? Like things, you may be able to help supplement your body with that either we're missing from our current diet, or your lifestyle is not allowing you to get proper levels of vitamin D, perhaps. Or like, what are the things that you would say people need to start looking out for that might help them just give themselves a little competitive advantage?
You know what? This is one of those bio-individuality things. It depends. Do you love working out? What is your goal? What do you want, physically? But if we're talking baseline, most people don't have enough potassium. They have too much sodium and not enough potassium. And most of the time people are told to cut back on their sodium, but they're never told to increase their potassium. Even though 96% of people are deficient, they have lower levels of potassium than they should, which is causing issues. Magnesium is another one that we're actually really low in for a number of reasons. So I could go into that whole thing, but a lot of our food doesn't have the same levels of these minerals that they used to have, because our soil health and those types of things. But if we think of magnesium is so incredibly critical to our metabolic health and our stress response, clearing cortisol, all of these things, utilizing our sugar that we're eating in our food. When we're chronically stressed and we're having a high sugar diet and we're not sleeping well, we burn through magnesium like a Corvette going through gas. And so And that's huge because it keeps a lot of metabolic processes from happening appropriately in our body. So, for example, for me personally, I live in New England. Between November and February, it's not actually even possible on a perfectly sunny day to get any vitamin D because the UV index isn't appropriate because of where the sun is in the sky. I have to supplement vitamin D, and I supplement K2 along with it because it's that combination. K allows you to get D to work to bring calcium into your bones. And as a woman who is going into menopause, I have to pay attention to that. So there's a lot of these things that go together. My critical items are magnesium, vitamin K, and vitamin D. Those are the ones I'm most conscientious about. And then I created my own electrolyte powder that costs me way less and is very easy to make. And I'll add that to my water, and I make sure that I get that potassium in there as well. And I really focus on whole foods, but as much as I possibly can, I'll get everything I can from whole foods. And there's certain things that I know are difficult to do. And I think it really, really comes down to every single person's situation. Some people can't eat a lot of vegetables because they may have some gastrointestinal issues, right? And so they can't get these vitamins and minerals and micronutrients entirely from whole foods, in which case, a whole food supplement might be important for them. And so it really does come down to the individual. One thing that I think that people mistake is saying, well, my labs came back and they said my levels were normal, because they're looking at how much magnesium is in the blood or how much potassium is in the blood or how much calcium is in the blood, and it's normal. Your body regulates those so tightly. That's the last place it's going to change. Intracellularly, where all these things are actually functioning and working, that's what matters. And we're not ever really measuring that. So once your blood shows a problem, now you're really in trouble. It's really a serious situation. But, so when it comes to supplementing, it's really individual. I really hesitate to give a blanket statement, except for the fact that most people in the North area have to supplement vitamin D, or people who might avoid the sun a lot might need to do some red light supplements, supplementation along with some vitamin D supplementation if for whatever reason they are not going outside or can't get into the sun. And it doesn't have to be a huge amount, but there's a lot of really fantastic information just put out there by lots of people about the importance of sunlight on our cardiovascular health, especially. And whatnot. There's so many biological processes that I could just geek out with you about, but you already are going to have to re-listen to the part about the mitochondria. I don't want to add any more to that. But
No,
it
I love
is
that.
really individual. Yeah.
And I think it goes back to kind of what you said earlier about not being afraid to experiment, right? So, hey, maybe you take 2 weeks where you change nothing else, which again, that's super important to not change 15 things at once, because you never know what the good or the bad was that happened from it. But hey, take 2 weeks, experiment with a magnesium supplement, see, do you feel better, right? Are you feeling the positive results from it? Yay or nay? The answer might be no, it might be yes, right? But then evaluate and then, hey, move on. Do you want to adjust it for another 2 weeks? Do you want to try something else 2 weeks after that? Not being afraid to continually level yourself up 1% at a time, right? And I
Yeah.
feel like there's this expectation we have that if I get 1% better in 2 weeks, it was a total waste, right? You feel like you have to be 35%, 40% better in 2 days. Otherwise, you're wasting time. But what happens is we waste years going in circles that we never actually make the progress. Had we just stayed consistent with that 2 weeks at a time, I think we'd all be way better off. So I love that advice.
Yeah. It's absolutely true. Just be patient. Be patient. It took a while to get where you are. And we just have this cultural expectation of instantaneous. If I want to know, my husband, he's very careful about the questions he asks in my general vicinity because he knows that you're like, you don't have to answer it if you don't know the answer right off the top. And I'm like, oh no, I'm researching this right now. Everything's dropping, so because we have the ability to just know things right now. But our body doesn't change instantaneously. And I would say, when it comes to experimenting with something, and you want to try a supplement, I do, not to toot my own horn or anything like that, but we don't know everything, and there's a lot of information out there. Find somebody you trust. I know for, a lot of, now you can Google, you'll find out that magnesium glycinate is one of the best ones, magnesium threonate. Something that is chelated to an amino acid is going to be way better and more bioavailable for you for magnesium than something like magnesium oxide, which is what they prescribe to you if you were to get a prescription for it. Very low bioavailability. It's only really good if you're severely constipated because it will clean you out. And if you're not constipated, you don't want to be taking that. That is not fun. Been there, done that. So, but a gentle one, we need glycine. We don't get a lot of it, so magnesium glycinate is really wonderful if you are having a hard time sleeping. And it helps you clear that cortisol while you sleep. What sleep is for. We're supposed to do that. So one of the things that I always like to do is say, hey, take your magnesium an hour before bed. Don't take it in the morning with everything else, right? It's enhancing melatonin. It's enhancing other things and other processes. So it's really ideal to take magnesium glycinate in the evening. If you need more magnesium than that, you can take another kind of magnesium in the morning or or at lunch or whatever. But it's very relaxing. Vitamin D, it's a sunshine vitamin. Take it in the morning. Right? It's fat soluble. Don't take a dry pill. Yeah, you got to have either it with fat or you have to have it with breakfast or something like that in order to absorb it. So knowing these little tips and tricks about how to supplement is important. So it's not just, hey, I bought this thing that said this thing and then I'm just taking it and nothing's changing, right? Just taking vitamin D, for example, doesn't mean anything if it's not converting and not measurable in the blood. So the most important thing is if you are supplementing, get some labs done every few months to make sure that it's actually making a change in your body. I made that mistake. I was taking one that looked really great on paper. I was like, this is a good vitamin D. And I took the recommended amount for the day. And I was taking it in the morning with my coffee. And my vitamin D was very low at that time. This is when I first started looking at my vitamin D. I was like 27. It was terrible. And it didn't change. It went up to like 28 a year, like 6 months later. I said, what the heck? So I did some research. I said, oh, duh, right? It's fat soluble. And I wasn't, eating it with food. So I found one that came in fat. It comes liquid. It's and I took a little bit more. And then I added a good quality K2 source, also in fat, because vitamin K is also fat soluble, right? Important to understand that. And when I did that, and then I did my magnesium in the evening, my vitamin D shot up to 80. That's what worked, right? So understanding that just because you're taking a supplement doesn't mean that it's getting where you want it to go, and you can experiment, and it's okay. You didn't waste any time. You learned a thing. It's all right.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I want to thank you for all of this, and I know we're kind of running out of time, which is honestly probably a good thing because my mind is so blown by all this stuff. I got 48 hours of research I got to do after this conversation now, but thank you again for all of your contributions to not only this conversation, but to the people that you continue to help. Hearing your story of kind of where you started to now this level of impact you're able to have on changing people's lives is amazing. So just want to give honor to you for doing that. Not an easy thing to do, but it makes a tremendous difference. So thank you for that. All that said, how can we best support you and where can people engage with you from here on out?
Well, I have a Facebook group called Be the Boss, Be Well. As you can find me online in my private community. My last name is here, Pazniokas, Pazniokas. So you can find me as Stephanie Pazniokas on Facebook. Shoot me a friend request. I'm here. But I also have a little gift for you if you're struggling with sleep, like so many of us are. We tend to stay up too late on the phones or whatever. That's the only me time we get in the day. So I do have a gift. So if you go to, it's just sjphealthwell.com/be the boss gift, all one word, be the boss gift. You're going to be able to get my top 20 tips for sleep. And there's a little sleep quiz in there. So it's going to help you understand which things to apply to help you get better sleep. And I hope that helps you. And I'm more than happy to just give you a link to that if you want to share it. I don't know if that's something that you're interested in, but I do like to give a little something. So
yeah, thank you. We will definitely add that in the show notes. And I look forward to taking that quiz myself. We had the sleep doctor on here a few episodes back. And that was an awesome conversation. I picked up a couple great things there that I implemented and really saw some benefit from. So
It can be
I love
fast.
that. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Jim.
My pleasure. Thank you. Hey, before you go, can I pray for you real quick? Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for the opportunity today to speak life into the person on the other side of this podcast. Father God, I want to thank you for bringing us together in a position where we could both learn, where we can continue to sharpen our swords, where we can continue to elevate our lives to what you've called them to be. I ask that you continue to put us in situations where we can advance each other and use the gifts that we have that you've given us to make each of us stronger, healthier, happier, more stress-free version of ourselves, so we can continue to pour into the people around us and lift each other up and experience joy and all the goodness that we have for each other. So Father God, we ask these things in your name. Amen. Love you.